This is my best kind of show notes because we didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Oh, like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is it not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're
how
insane.
Did I do that?
You're insane.
Well, today is not an anxiety-inducing day, although behind me is there's the before and after, right? Before is the backdrop, the anxiety-inducing green screen, but afterwards will be calm, will be peace, will be a moment of Zen, because I have tremendous joy when I'm able to revisit and reconnect with now a new friend, an old friend, a new friend. Lodro Rinzler is here. He was on the show in November. He's back. I went and rewatched elements of the show and hearing him say, you know what, I've got a book coming out. Maybe I'll come back. I said, yes, you should come back. So it's good to he said, I've just got to finish it. And so it's amazing to see something come to fruition. When someone is thinking out loud and talking about aspirations, how much of our best laid plans, right, of our ideas, of our intentions, of our hopes, our dreams never get realized. And today, of course, is the realization that he has a new book coming out. But we will get to that soon. It is appropriately World Human Spirit Day. I did not make that up, February 17th. And who better to be my guest than Lodro, talking about the incredible spirit of the human and of humanity indeed. And Lodro will be on the show soon. His new book that I was alluding to is called Take Back Your Mind. If you've lost your mind, you can find it and take it back. Buddhist Advice for Anxious Times. And certainly the times we are living in are times of angst and anxiety. So Lodro is my one returning guest. Tomorrow, Mark Schaefer is another returning guest. He too has a new book that is out, Cumulative Advantage. And then afterwards, we're going to do a little bit of an experiment. We're going to exclusively move to Clubhouse afterwards and test out what the after show looks like. Focused, not simulcast, but really focused on Clubhouse. And then, of course, our community episode is on Friday. Not too much in the birthday camp on Facebook. Pete Mitchell, I wish you bad luck, my friend, because he is a Manchester City fan and Tottenham Hotspur play Manchester City in the Carabao Cup final coming up. And I hope you have a happy birthday, but an unhappy Carabao Cup final. You've won too many trophies and too much silverware, and it's time to share the love with some poor sods, losers, habitual lifetime losers like Tottenham Hotspur. We need to change that. Anne Bowman is here. She loves the T-shirt, although she said folks in Texas are not having a great Spirit Day. Yeah, it is crazy. Anne says she has a bunch of girlfriends who should watch the show today. Well, why not reach out to them and get them to watch the show today? Yes, bad luck, Anne. It's good to have you back. I missed you yesterday. I missed your frequent commenting. It keeps me on my toes. And thank you for warming YouTube at the moment. I have to tell you, by the way, been having interesting issues, anxiety-inducing issues with YouTube, because I've decided, to start promoting these shows on a daily basis, to introduce new people, new audience to the channel, to the shows, to CoronaTV, to myself. But every day for the last 3 days, I have had my ads get rejected. These episodes have been rejected. Why, you might ask, have these episodes been rejected? For two reasons. One is alcohol advertising, and the other one is sensitive events and sensitive issues, and in particular, exploiting those sensitive events. So I was stumped. I was thinking, I don't get it. There's no alcohol advertiser on Corona TV, and sensitive issues. Anxiety is not sensitive issues. You know, servant authorship with Ann Janzer isn't sensitive issues. Corona. And then I realized the good old name of the show potentially is flagging at Facebook and YouTube HQ in terms of selling alcohol to minors and exploiting current events, neither of which are happening. So I had a little bit of my own anxiety today, but I'm trying to deal with it as well. Adam says it might be a Nutella sensitivity, and he is not referring to why my ad was rejected, even though, yes, Nutella does need to sponsor, but Anne had food poisoning, which is why she was absent. But I'm glad that you are over your food poisoning. I'm just wondering if maybe the ads were rejected because of too much gratuitous Nutella love. We will never know. Anyway, let's get back to the show because I digress. Let's talk about LinkedIn, Max Castex, Marion Gomez, Candace Morch, Jack Jokinen, and Mike Hammontree. Happy birthday to all of you. Well, it's time for our seated soliloquy, and today's seated soliloquy is an interesting one. It was something that came to me yesterday, if you will, but it's something that certainly has relevance and resonance for the subject at hand. Probably the number one anxiety in our lives is financial, right? Money matters. It's one of the main reasons why people get divorced, and perhaps it's actually the main reason, if memory serves. This clearly has been elevated during 2020 and these challenging times with respect to money matters and money concerns. So yesterday I was involved in a conversation where the following phrase was said: if money was no object, what would you do? Now, we've all used these kinds of hypotheticals in life, in business. They're great thought starters, catalysts for creativity and brainstorming, and they push us out of our comfort zones when we consider what-if scenarios. When I've done facilitation in the past at workshops, I've used ones like, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you do? Or if you rubbed a lamp and a genie appeared and granted you 3 wishes, what would you wish for? In a business setting, there is the wonderful reset. If you could start all over again, what would you do differently? If you could start an airline, if you could start a bank, what would you do differently? This is the recognized blank canvas or even the blue ocean approach. Or there's the, if you were the CEO and running the show, what's the first thing you would do? What if you fired yourself? And finally, of course, the budget-related one. If you were given a blank check, what would you spend it on? Now, while you're thinking about your own answers, I want to come back to the original question with a bit more context. If money was no object, what would you be doing with your life? What would you be doing professionally? What would you be doing personally? Where would you be working? Where would you be living? Here's the kicker and my epiphany from yesterday, which I wanted to share with you today. Guess what? You answered this question in 2020 without even knowing it. For so many of you, for so many of us, in 2020, money was no object because there was none. So what you did is what you should have been doing all along. Let me repeat that. What you did is what you should have been doing all along. What I did is what I was meant to be doing. When money was no object, I started CoronaTV. I chose to become a talk show host. I leaned into streaming. I leaned away from consulting. This was my moment of Zen, my moment of clarity, which was staring at me in the face all along. And that, my friends, is like a fresh glass of meditation juice. Not Jaffe juice, meditation juice. Guaranteed to control, reduce, and even eliminate any money-related anxiety, well, at least for today. So something to think about. And of course, you know, I am always intrigued as to what my guest has to say about the soliloquy. So for those of you that don't remember, Lodro Rinzler is amazing. He has taught Buddhism for 20 years, starting when he was just 18 years old. He is the author of 6 previous meditation books, including the bestseller, The Buddha Walks into a Bar, Richie Glassberg's favorite book, and the co-founder of Mindful Meditation Studios in New York City. His books, Walk Like a Buddha and The Buddha Walks into the Office, both have received Independent Publisher Book Awards. Named one of 50 innovators shaping the future of wellness, Rinzler's work has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic, Good Morning America, CBS, NBC, and most notably, CoronaTV. Let's welcome him back to the show. Returning guest. Welcome back, Lodro.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm always so tickled by your soliloquies and also just all the fun facts. Happy Human Spirit Day. I was really happy to move into Human Spirit Day. Yesterday, I think, was Dog Spirit Day. All of the ghosts of my past dogs came to visit me. You know, I imagine with Human Spirit Day, my grandparents will come visit me. Is that what it's supposed to be? That like the spirits of?
As long as they're not haunting you, or maybe it's just a testament to the human spirit. You know, resourcefulness, resilience, perseverance, tenacity. You know, the ability to optimism, hope, positivity, etc., etc.
Yeah, I get that, and I also feel like it's almost like when you get those things like the screen time on your iPhone that says, "Look how much time you've been spending on your phone." You're like, "It's a pandemic," and I sort of feel the same way where they're like, "Happy Human Spirit Day," and you're like, every day in the pandemic is Human Spirit Day, a tribute to our resilience and the fact that we are all actually still getting up and putting on clothes in the morning and meeting with each other. So I think happy every day being Human Spirit Day.
Indeed, and by the way, you know that there is a quote. We may as well just get straight to that quote today, because the quote is, "Trust yourself. You've survived a lot, and you'll survive whatever is coming." And I can tell you who said it, and I couldn't find. I don't know who this. Have you ever heard of Robert II?
No, I have not.
Well, Robert II said this. And sometimes I kind of Google them and a bunch of weird things come up. So I'm not really sure who he is. But I loved it because it's like, you know, when we are faced, Lodro, with these what seem insurmountable challenges, where our very survival and thrival is on the line. I love this idea of trusting ourselves, right? Which is to say, hey, we've made it this far. Why on earth do we feel that now of all times in our lives, we are not equipped, or we don't have the resilience in the tank to be able to figure out how to kind of get, this too we shall overcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great quote, and it is a fascinating topic, because when I wrote my last book, what was my last book? Love Hurts, Buddhist Advice for the Heartbroken. It was the same notion of like, you've been like, when our world falls apart, and it could be romantic relationship, it could be family, it could be deep loss, it could be job related, to actually remember back like, oh, I've been through hard times before. And that means like, I've already gone through something like this before. Like we have deeper confidence in our resilience, deeper confidence in our ability to move and to heal. And often when people do write me as a result of that book, and they say, I don't think I'm ever going to love again. This is it for me. This is, often they're like, I'm this age. But sometimes that age is like 18. Sometimes that age is much older. Yeah. But I'll never find anyone after this. the thing I always write back, or sometimes they include their phone number, I actually call them and respond, is that if there's good news to the truth of impermanence, it's that we actually change and heal. And that's just a natural thing that happens over time. So that even some of the painful and difficult emotions that we experience are impermanent and that they can fade. And for whatever reason, people are like, oh yeah, I can survive these things.
I was just thinking, like when we have painful moments in our life, we almost, especially like really, really painful, we want to kind of sweep them under the rug or repress them, or they do get repressed. In some cases, we forget, or we want to forget. And I'm almost wondering if it's like a counterintuitive thing that we shouldn't forget. We shouldn't distance ourselves. We should, I don't want to say embrace them, but we need to keep those moments. And sometimes I'll say, don't ever forget this moment, this moment of pain, because you need to be able to identify it when it comes again. And you need to be able to then immediately figure out how to distance yourself and deal with it. I don't know how you think about that idea when we have these memories. What should we be doing? Should we be embracing them? Should we be kind of trying to forget them, or maybe somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I think it's very personal and it depends on what it is. But at the same time, as a longtime meditation teacher, so much of us being with the body, breathing and just hanging out with ourselves is us getting to know the good, bad, and ugly of all of what's up. I remember, this is just what popped in my mind, my first really long meditation retreat, a month-long retreat, a couple weeks. I was 17 years old and I had broken up with my high school girlfriend. And I said, God, I was a real jerk about it. And I spent days, literal days, because what else did I have to do with my mind? Just torturing myself about what a horrible breaker-upper I was. And I swore to myself I would never be like that again. And of course, I was, but these are the things that we learn about. But I swore, like, okay, I'm going to find this person and I'm going to make it right. And I tried to find that person. This is pre-Facebook and I couldn't. Years pass. And I actually, this person friended me on Facebook and we were chatting. And I said, by the way, I just wanted to bring up, the fact that I was a cat. I was not very gracious. I was insensitive. And this woman goes, oh, I don't remember it like that at all. And I had spent days torturing myself. So I think there is something, and then of course, months and years thereafter, I think there's something to this where it's like, we actually do need to acknowledge our stories and own our stories. And as you said, use this as fodder for like, oh, I can heal, I can move on, I can learn from these things. That's important. I think the learning process is something that we as a society really need to sort of focus on. I mean, it's a time of deep unlearning for many of us. I think a lot of heterosexual men are unlearning toxic masculinity. I think a lot of white people are unlearning systemic racism. I think there's lots of positive things here, but it's like we sort of have to reflect on our experience to the best of our ability, learn from it, and move forward with better actions and qualities that we want to cultivate in ourselves. So it's a long-winded answer, but I do think like there is learning that can come from these things, but at the same time, it's like, should I always revisit my deep trauma? Probably not. Probably that's time for, we do that with a therapist or some such thing.
Yeah. So it's almost like this idea of compartmentalize, know where it lives, don't dwell on it, don't obsess on it, move on, but be able to revisit it when you need to. And especially in terms of avoiding the pain from happening again, I suppose. So that's definitely a great build. Now, Lodro, last time you came into the CoronaTV virtual studio, you very kindly facilitated my very first meditation, introduction to meditation. And here is a little screenshot of this. Was not riveting streaming TV, that is for sure, because there were moments of silence, a lot of silence. A lot of people meditated with us. And I actually went back and I sent this to you, which is, I said, this is what meditation sounds like, or at least what it looks like. This is the audio visual representation, where those little blue spikes are your dulcet calming, peaceful tones, and the silence, of course, was these moments of introspection. But I've tried to do additional meditation since. I still think I'm learning. I have not had moments of epiphany or awakening or enlightenment, but I'm starting to do it actually through my Peloton. I'm doing classes. I did a 20-minute class the other day, or meditation, that went by like this, but I still haven't. I don't think I've arrived, but I realize that that's okay. And I just want to thank you for introducing me to this beautiful new practice.
Thank you for sharing that. And I am tickled that Peloton's now in the meditation game. In the same way that I'm tickled that, like, Netflix has a Headspace special, and I'm sure McDonald's will now have your mindfulness meal. And I'm sure there's going to be also
indeed, it's a lot of air.
Yes, exactly, and it's twice as much. But I think it's great, and as you said, it did not make riveting television. I realize, but there's something about just even taking these little moments. I mean, you're putting yourself down a little bit of like, oh, there's no great epiphany, there's no great peace, but a little moment of peace is actually pretty huge. And I think this is something that is, I've been teaching meditation for 20 years now, and I train meditation teachers as well. And one of the things I always tell them is our job is essentially to give the instruction and to hold people's hands long enough that they start to say, oh, there's a gap there, where for a moment I was just able to rest and just feel the body breathing. And that was nice enough. And maybe that's this whole peaceful thing that they're always talking about. And in that moment, it's no longer a Lodro Rinzler sitting there telling them about it. It's their own experience. And if they had that experience once, they could have it twice. If they have it twice, they could have it for a minute. And then we start to deepen our relationship to peace. So it becomes sort of a continuity of peace, as opposed to, we often see this in the movie, like some great ecstatic, like laser beams shoot out of the eyeballs, and, the sun radiates in all directions from our forehead. Like, it's a little bit more subtle than that.
It's not an epiphany. It's a miniphany. It's a mini epiphany. It's not even that. Yeah, but I love that idea. It's a small moment that you can actually savor. I did have another little anecdote to share with you. I was moderating a room on Clubhouse the other day, and someone came up to the stage and they said, "You said something, Joseph," and immediately I had a reaction to it, and I felt that doesn't make sense, and I wanted to disagree, and it was at odds with what I believed. He said, and then I meditated on it for a while and came to this realization and understood what you meant, and was able to kind of reconcile and really understand those moments of commonality. And I appreciated what he said. I didn't quite understand what he meant, but I wanted to share that with you and ask you what was going on there in terms of how he was able to, was this just the ability to pause and slow down in order to see a bigger picture and realize, instead of that gut visceral reaction, that there might have been more in play and at play?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely question. So I think in common parlance, we would say, oh, I'm going to meditate on that. And if we look at sort of a classic definition of meditation, it's essentially substituting our discursive thinking for another object of our attention. So, I could be meditating on the breath. I could be meditating on sound. I could be meditating on a mantra, a phrase I would repeat. Or I could meditate on a concept. Can I just sit with the concept of gratitude? Can I sit with the concept of impermanence? And can I let that sort of reality permeate my being? So it does, I think there is something about just creating more space for us to just sort of sink in and be with our current experience, as opposed to getting too lost in the discursive stream of thought that often takes over the mind.
I love that idea, being able to meditate on a concept. Meditate on money matters, right? Meditate on, if money was no object, what would you do? And guess what? Maybe you were doing it. You were doing it without even realizing it. So thank you for that. You're very thoughtful, Lodro, and I love the way that when I ask you a question, you'll say thank you for the question, or if I do and say something like follow Lodro on Instagram and Twitter and this wonderful long LinkedIn thread, and and purchase his new book, which we'll talk about as well, you'll always respond by saying thank you for doing that, which of course you're very welcome, but this is why you're on the show as well. But I love that. It's a thoughtfulness that actually makes me feel good about myself and makes me want to do more for you in return.
Oh, well, I really appreciate you saying that. And thank you for sharing all of those links. It's an interesting thing with this new book as well, because I can blush and be like, oh gosh, yes, I'm on Instagram. But when people are like, oh, and you can buy the book, I'm actually sort of like, yeah. And here's why. Like, I'm all of a sudden, the book doesn't feel like it's about me for many reasons. One is, I've always, like, when I channel the stuff into the books, it does feel like, oh, I'm doing this with the intention of helping others. I'm going to wave the book around because it's sitting here and people are like, why is he looking down? And this particular one, all of the proceeds are now being offered to two charities. The first is the Loveland Foundation, which is therapeutic support for Black and brown women. And the other is Feeding America food banks, because not everyone, of course, during the midst of this pandemic has access to easy access to food. So all of the proceeds are going in those two directions. So I'm like, yeah, go buy the book, so that like that money goes there. And it feels like this great cycle where maybe you get some help from the book, but at the same time, you're also helping people who are in need. So it feels like it's the first one that's like, this is a really nice cycle for us.
I love that so much. And, it's, yesterday I had Anne Janzer on the show, and she spoke about this concept called servant authorship, where you are a servant leader as an author. And you've taken it one step further, clearly, because you're not just thinking of the reader, but you're thinking of additional lives that can be benefited, quite frankly, through the advice, because these are people that can, by taking back their mind and reducing their own levels of stress and anxiety, they can serve their spouse, their partners, their employees, their community better, but also you're actually making a difference. So that's amazing. So I've just pasted a link to Amazon in the comments if you do choose to buy the book, and you will choose to buy the book because we're gonna do a something very cool about the book. In fact, let's do it now. I have to play around with a couple of things. I decided to do something, I don't know, different, and I said, what do you think about this? And you were game, which I appreciate. You could have said, oh, I don't like that idea at all. So this is what's called the wheel of names, and it's just a random generated wheel. And what it allows us to do, Lodro, is just to pick. Let me put that on right there. It allows us just to pick any chapter at random, and you get to talk about that chapter. So should we give it a whirl?
Yes, please.
All right. Chapter 37. Chapter 37. Now, chapter 37, according to what I see in my book, is called True Love in Relationships. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the book overall, it's structured in this way where we have an initial section. There's 4 sections. The first one is really based in how do we work with our own minds, and both meditation, but also like on the spot techniques of just when we catch ourselves spiraling into anxiety, and ways that we can come back to the present moment. And then it moves into like, okay, and how do we relate to other people? It's like the whole other, there's many other sections, like not just our anxiety, the anxiety around us, societal anxiety. Like we are living in this moment of deep societal anxiety. It's like such a rarity that we as a collective are going through a similar experience of anxiety. Often anxiety is like, oh, me and my thing that is going on with, work or my family, and like that's my thing. But right now it's like we've got this pandemic and we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know when everything goes back to normal or if it goes back to normal. Even me saying that might bring about anxiety. So I think we're in a really interesting moment, and I wanted to talk about that in this book as well, of like the big societal stressors as well. But at some point, we also need to acknowledge the deeper relationships in our life. So chapter 37, to actually answer your question, is one where we look at the sense of deep connection and how that can move us out of just thinking about me and my thing. An analogy that I often like to think about around anxiety is that of a veil. It's sort of like, it's nice that we have the video here that I can actually do this. If I'm just thinking about me and my anxiety of the day, what are we going to do about this thing? There's this work thing, blah, blah. I'm basically walking around like this. And meditation, these other techniques, is like going, oh, I'm going to lift that off for a moment, and then maybe it comes right back. Okay, I lift it off for a moment, it comes right back. And we continue on in that direction. Ideally, the more we train the mind to do that, the more that the anxiety is like a little bit off, and we can actually see our world more clearly as a result. One of the favorite things I've learned over time is that if we want to be miserable, we should probably only think about us and our anxious things. But if we want to be happy, we can think of others. And that's a big part of this, that we all have some sort of relationship. It doesn't have to even be a romantic relationship. It could be familial. It could be, there's off screen, there's a cat who's taken over my desk chair. But something of like love and allowing the heart to just be open. It seems to be a pretty common theme now that I'm looking back over the other books. Prior to this was the Love Hurts Heartbreak book. Before that was a book called How to Love Yourself and Sometimes Other People. And it has the sense of like, love is always available to us. And if we could actually come to a place of tapping within our own open-heartedness, that will immediately shift us out of a state of anxiety.
It makes me think of, and I'll even go back pre-pandemic, that something that I've tried to instill even in the kids, which is we are naturally loving people. To your point, we are naturally kind. Our natural state is warmth, is empathy, is the ability to connect, to belong. But when we are rude, when we are abrupt, when we are curt, when we have a meltdown in public, there's something going on. And I've always said, when somebody cuts you off, when somebody extends the middle finger, think about this. Instead of lambasting them or swearing back at them, think about something's going on in their life. They're having a bad day. And I think when you talk about true love in relationships, we do two things. When our spouse, our partner, our business partner, when they act in an untoward way, do we actually immediately find that point of empathy and realize something's going on because they're naturally not like that? But B, when it's going on in our lives, and this is the point that I want to make to you, how giving are we to be able to say, by the way, something's going on right now, so just you may want to avoid me, or I need a 15-minute timeout, and anything comes out of my mouth, I want you to discount that because I'm going through a rough time. I can tell you, me personally, I like to build up walls. I don't want to indicate weakness, vulnerability to others, but I'm learning the hard way at times that, to your point, true love works both ways, and you have to be able to you have to give to get.
Yeah. And I think, you just used a really powerful word, which is vulnerability. And it's really interesting because that's the last place that many of us want to be. And anxiety is something that holds us in a state of absolute brittleness. There's an analogy in an earlier chapter here that I use, which is that of the cocoon, that ultimately what we often do over the course of a day is we walk out and we start saying, okay, here's how I'm going to handle this, and this is going to happen. And every thought becomes like a new thread of a cocoon that essentially wraps us up and feels like it's protecting us, but ultimately it's also blocking us from connecting with the world around us. And the more I used the analogy of the veil before, same thing, only now it's like a full body situation that we've told ourselves so many stories. Maybe we feel like we're protecting ourselves, but ultimately we're just disconnected from the world around us. The very active meditation is actually like taking a jackhammer and attaching a Brillo pad to it and hammering away right here at the heart center and busting through that cocoon. So there's a sense of openness.
And if there's anything worse than a cocoon, it's a veiled cocoon, right? So that that would be the bad one. All right, so I want to go back to our wheel and spin our wheel again. I kind of like this game.
Okay.
Let's see where the wheel takes us. Isn't this interesting?
It's fascinating. It's also fascinating. It's like, let's talk about the interview book, because you've probably been reading a lot about your audience.
Yeah, I knew, by the way, this was going to happen. Chapter 39, it went to the final chapter in the book, which is called Anxiety and the Modern Family, which ironically is the only chapter, I don't know why, I bolded. I don't know why. I have no idea why I bolded that, because I don't have a modern family here. But I just felt like it was important to share that with people. So tell us about anxiety in the modern family.
Sure. And it's also funny because, you know, in your intro, you have these moments where you're like, this is who you look like. So funnily enough, this is not related to the book, but is related to the words Modern Family. When the television show Modern Family first came out, I was often mistaken for Jesse Tyler Ferguson. And it wasn't just like casual. It was like people standing at the other side of a restaurant talking about it for long periods of time, coming over and being like, excuse me, sir, I'm so sorry to bother you in a business meeting, but will you please sign an autograph for my friend? And it happened a remarkable amount, so much so that at some point because I was actually like in a heated like business meeting, and I literally was just like, sure. And I wrote my own name down and handed it back to them.
I can see it.
It was a very funny moment. You know, there was also a cross-ocean flight. I was flying back from London, and there was someone who crossed the aisle who was just like, wouldn't leave me alone. He's like, it's so cool that you're flying coach with the rest of us. he would not take no for an answer that I was.
Wait, Lodro flies coach?
Yes, right, exactly. Anyway, so the Modern Family. Yeah, so there's the thing that opens up this particular chapter is a great quote from the teacher Ram Dass, which is, if you think you're so enlightened, go spend a week with your family. And it is such a apt thing where, I mean, I love my family and they're wonderful people. And they also they know where the buttons are more than anyone else. We did a nice launch party for my book last night. And my mother, I predicted this. I told my wife immediately after, because she was there. I was like, how long until my mother says, writes me and says, well, here's what I'm thinking about what could have happened. And it was just, I woke up in the morning and there it was. It was just one of those situations where I knew not only what the habitual response might be, but also that it would hit a button for me. And it's for the people that know the buttons the best, or maybe even program those buttons. It's a real tough situation for us to actually say, how can I unhook myself from the stories and come into a different place of being with them? So that's a bad example, because I sort of went into the story of, oh, this is how my mother is going to be. And unfortunately, she didn't surprise. But a better way would be to say, I'm just going to be open here and see who this person is right now. Because particularly with people who we have had a relationship with for so many years, we think we have an understanding of who they are. And in fact, that's just an old version of them. And it's such an interesting thing. I mean, at this point, I've been married for 3 years. We've been together about 7. And there is some part of me, I think, that still clings to the idea of who this person was when I first met them, as opposed to who they are today. Because, of course, I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago, any shape or form. Why would I ever expect this person to be? Same thing with other members of our family, and even longer, decades of here's who I think they are, here's what their habitual thing is. And it just doesn't create any space or any moment of open-heartedness for us to actually connect with them and who they currently are. So there's a little bit of giving up the stories around that keep us locked in anxiety around our family, so that we could actually see them clearly for who they are today, as opposed to the ways that we tell ourselves that they might be.
There is so much in that idea. And by the way, Adam, that's funny. Adam said no spoilers. Chapter 39. How does it end? Did the butler do it? Did the butler is the butler in the library with the candlestick? Different. That is a different show. But let me go back to that for a second, Lodro, which is, I was thinking as you were talking, is it the modern family, or do we need to modernize the family, or do we need to modernize our relationships? You spoke about this idea of we fell in love with a person, with an idealism of that person, and maybe that holds us back. But more importantly, even if we take that baggage off the table, we are changing, we are evolving. And I guess the point there is, you have the modern family by definition, as in, a non-traditional family unit. But maybe what we need to be thinking of is even the core family unit, a husband, a wife, 3 children, 1.5 pets, and a white picket fence, that we need to continue to keep that dynamic, current, relevant, resonant, modern, and accept the fact that it is evolving and continuing to change. Otherwise, we will always be stuck in the past.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I mean, the example of the television show, of course, is that there's all different conglomerations of families that are being displayed in a wonderful way. And for me, who grew up without much immediate family, that very close friends became family to me, and we'd spend holidays together and all sorts of things as well. And even looking ahead as a married person, saying, oh, do we want a family? And what does that look like? And how does that shift our relationships, even to our blood relatives, our friend family, and all of these sorts of things? I think one of the points I make here is really that the very notion of family can be much more fluid than, not to be crass, and this will make sure that they actually don't let you promote these things, that, like, who came out of whose vagina? Now
this one just got rejected right now, but thank you.
So anyway, but like, this is a little bit more than that. And I think we can, as you said, modernize our understanding of what this means so that we can actually become more inclusive in our heart.
Oh, I love that idea. Look, the book is called Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice for Anxious Times. Let's just break that or deconstruct it slightly. When I see Take Back Your Mind, the first thing I thought of is the idea of losing your mind, or a mind is a terrible thing to waste. I would love for you to create the situational audit, if you will. Where are we right now, almost 1 year into this pandemic? Are we, in fact, as a society, as humanity, as humans, have we lost our mind, or how do we avoid losing our mind? That's the first part. And then we'll get into this idea of actually branding these times as anxious times. But we'll get to that in a second. So talk about the idea of have we lost our mind collectively?
It's a great question. Yes. Next question. No, the idea
that was an easy check. No.
Yes, it's an obvious one. I do feel like it used to be, I don't want to blame like technology and everything like that, because there's so many wonderful things that have come out of the fact that we can even sit here today and have a conversation is because of technology. But there was a moment in the not too distant past that people may remember, where you would leave work and you would come home and you would be done with work unless someone had the audacity to call you on your landline and say, we need something from you about work. And then you'd go in the next day. And of course, now, like, we as a society never said, now that's done, but it just happened because we got email, and then we got smartphones, and we got, people can text us, they can Slack us, they can email us at all hours, they could call if they want. And there's some sense of, oh, I never get to turn off from work. It's just there. It's just omnipresent. Okay, same thing with our news cycle. At a certain point, the news cycle was done. Now it's a nonstop news cycle. There's so many other versions of that that we've just sort of adopted, the sense of always having to be on. And that means that our mind is scattered in 10,000 directions in any given moment. that if, someone, I would be very impressed if someone actually had gone the entirety of this time of listening to us and they hadn't also looked at Instagram or also bought a brand new pair of shoes online or whatever, like they hadn't somehow done other things. That they, the idea of just focusing and being present to one thing has actually become a bit of a rarity. Another version of this would be that if you forgot your magazine on the subway, you would just sort of stare out the window or at other people. And now it's like we never have to be with ourselves. So I think the idea of being with ourselves, being present with ourselves has become very rare. And that's a bummer. So we do sort of need to take back our mind and claim some mental space and freedom for ourselves so that we're not constantly lost in distraction.
So the other part of that, of course, is this idea of recognizing that we are living in anxious times. The bridge between the two is the fact that perhaps, right, the multitasking, the fidgeting with our hands, the needing to be occupied the whole time, the not actually being able to embrace the silence and the peace associated with silence contribute towards the anxiety in these anxious times. But there's no question, whether it's political, whether it's pandemic, or anything else that begins with P, these are anxious times. Does it help us to actually recognize the times as anxious? In other words, like, do we have a better chance of finding peace if we actually say, it is what it is, let's just call it what it is, let's not put lipstick on this pig, let's not try and dress it up differently, let's recognize these are hard times, and then let's figure out how the hell we're going to get through them together?
Yeah, it's interesting. For whatever reason, I just had a flash of a memory, and I won't call it the specific news channel, but I was invited at one point to lead a meditation at some big corporate retreat for a news channel. And I, at the time, was doing a lot of different corporate meditation stuff and going to different companies and introducing them to the practice. But every company I went to, they were always like, we're really stressed out. We're like the most anxious, actually. And I was like, okay, maybe. And I got to this place, and the president of the company was displaying tweets where they were being attacked by the president. Like the president was name-checking him, name-checking the organization, and being like, these people are bad. And I was like, yeah, if the president of the United States is like running your name through the mud, that's you guys might actually win the cake and be the most anxious company. Like, fine, you can be the most anxious. But it was very funny because he was like, this is not something that could have existed before. It does feel like things have really ramped up in terms of our ability to attack one another, to tear each other down, to connect on a positive sense like we are right now, but also connect with the idea of giving into our more base qualities, which is not so great. So I do think that there's like any number of things societally that's being bred as a result of some of the things that are happening right now. But then we also have the big societal stressors like coronavirus, like the fact that we are in lockdown or in pandemic mode, and like the fact that there, between last time we spoke and now, there was, the Capitol here in the United States was rioted. I don't think that's a verb, but that there were riots at our Capitol. That there's all sorts of things that have just occurred that's like, well, this is brand new. This particular version of like big societal issue has gotten to a bigger head and seems more anxious and pressing than it used to be. So I do think to come back from the sense of like, oh my God, society's out there and it's anxious. Society's made up of us, right? We right now, for this hour, are spending time together creating a society. It's you and me and Adam and Anne and Alan and all sorts of people. Like we're all here actually making a conscious choice to talk about and contemplate how to take back the mind, how to actually keep ourselves grounded and sane in the midst of very anxious times. So this is a society. And then what happens after this? We go back to work, we go, see what's going on with our family, and then we relate to those societies, our work society, our family society, whatever it might be. And at this point, we are starting to have a ripple effect. That if you and I sat here, sort of trash talking the latest celebrity gossip or whatever, that's one energy we would then bring to everyone who's here connected with us, and then that we would all go into our collective other societies and spread. But hopefully we're doing something that's actually a little bit more grounded, a little bit more peaceful, and that actually helps us bring those qualities into the world around us. And that has a ripple effect on society overall. So the point being, society isn't something out there, it's something we're co-creating all the time. And what do we want to actually see in society, and how can we as individuals bring that to be?
Well, I love that. Society isn't something out there. It's in a way, this is our little mini society. This is our mini modern family, at least for 1 hour. I'm looking at so many of the comments, and I will begin with Glenn. Glenn is definitely making me the calmest. Because he said, I have 100% been listening to your words, as opposed to everyone else that is fidgeting and doing everything else. I'm just teasing you. But there are some amazing, I think, comments, coming on, and it's great to see these members of my family now that I'm just going to start calling them that. Haiti says it's important how we struggle to be with ourselves. And doing just that can bring so many gifts. And, it made me think of this, Lodro, which is this idea of, quite frankly, medication versus meditation. Because I think that from a societal standpoint, this has been the easy go-to solution to medicate, to over-medicate, to turn to some of our vices, which, by the way, is the corona question, which I'm going to have to ask you at some point as well, that I think, without judging or asking you to have to make a judgment, I think sometimes we do look for an easier solution or whatever, the path of least resistance, as opposed to maybe one of the hardest things, which is to look in the mirror and come to terms with the person staring back at us.
That's exactly right. It is so easy to place blame on others, and it's every time that we have one of these big societal issues, it triggers something in me where how do I co-create this? And it was in a bizarre example, but I have a neighbor who subscribes to a lot of the QAnon philosophies, and will actively share them on social media and so on. And I thought, gosh, this person's been so radicalized. And then I thought, this person, here I am, Lodro Rinzler, with, giving the proceeds of this book away to, charities and people that are not as easily supported, people who are systemically disadvantaged. She probably looks at me and goes, this guy's been radicalized. And, what a fool he is to give away his hard-earned money and things like that. And it's a really interesting thing. It's every time I start to notice, I'm sinking into that place of judgment or othering, or my friend and meditation teacher colleague, Ralph De La Rosa, has a great point that when we find people who we disagree with, we either think they're crazy, or that if they knew what we knew, then they wouldn't believe what they believe. And I feel like that's such a fallacy. If we can look at that and say, I'm going to bring this full circle in a minute, I promise, not you're bad or you're wrong, but you see things differently. Where can I seek to understand? And the Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh has said in many different ways, in many different forms, understanding is the other name for love, and that if we can't understand, we can't love. So to come full circle back to chapter 37, he said, remembering what we were talking about, that there is, if we want to access a sense of open-heartedness towards others, we do actually need to seek to understand. Where is the inroads to understanding, particularly people that we don't necessarily agree with, or people that we don't necessarily know very well?
So I want to go back to, I want to make sure that we end today with a little bit of a retrospective back to the first time you came into CoronaTV, but also, to make it a little bit personal. But I want to thank you for writing this book. I want to thank you for giving the proceeds away to people that really need it. The book is called Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice for Anxious Times. There it is, and I'll show it again afterwards. But one of the things that you offer in this book are tips and techniques to work with the mind in daily life. In addition to all the insights and advice you've given, are there any that you want to just touch on in this moment to share with people? A couple of these key tips or techniques to help them and help us with our, deal with all the stress and anxiety.
Happy to. Yeah. I'll just mention 2.5. And the first is that what I call in here the hiccup meditation, which is not a real form of meditation, but in the same way a hiccup interrupts us slightly, the idea here is that we could interrupt ourselves when we find ourselves lost in stress and anxiety. And the idea is that we would take 3 deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, and that just helps to calm and reset the nervous system. So somehow, even just taking that gap of focusing on these 3 deep breaths, if we're feeling ambitious, 7 deep breaths, that can help bring us out of the stories we're telling ourselves and back into the present moment. The other one, the second and the 2.5, is 2 questions that I often think are helpful when we notice that we're telling ourselves story after story after story around anxiety. At a certain point, we can ask ourselves, is this helpful? Or the alternative, the 2.5, is this useful? It's essentially the same question. Some people might gravitate more towards one than the other, but the idea of maybe after the first time we need to address whatever stressor is happening in our life, sure, that's helpful for me to think about. I addressed the thing. After the 50th time where I'm still playing it out in my head, what am I going to do about that? How's this going to play out? At some point, I'd say, oh, this is no longer helpful. And if it's not helpful, that answer comes back, then we're much more likely to let it go.
I love that. Well, I'm gonna have to start the breathing exercise the next time Google rejects. Now if Google does reject this episode, I don't even have to breathe. I can just say, well, it's definitely the vagina comment. But that should not be a reason, by the way, Lodro, because I think in context it made a lot of sense. That we did these fun facts last time when you came in. I love the fact that you were here in November. Here you are, like only 3 months later, totally different conversation. We could keep talking for hours. But I have to say, I'm really, really grateful for the fact that, and I know your wife is, we have to thank her too, that we came up with some new fun facts about you. But I find these fun facts to be really interesting because the fun facts about you do not sound like a master meditation guru. First of all, you've become a lumberjack since I think we last spoke. So I have no idea where this I don't know, the physical violence. I'm not really sure what's going on with Lodro, but you've become a lumberjack since you purchased your house. And here's another thing, by the way, that you're doing CrossFit as well. So like the things you do to unwind sound very anxiety inducing and stressful. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but maybe this is the key. The secret to your calming nature is the fact that you have a way to actually just get out your frustrations.
I think for many years, I was a walking head on a stick, meaning that I was not really in my body. It was meditation in particular was a mental exercise. And only in recent years have I started to be like, oh, there's this whole other part of me that actually is physical and can actually be in nature and can actually, understand my moves and like the way that my body moves and things like that. So it's actually like, even though these are sort of bizarre examples, it's really the examples of like someone who's actually coming home to their body after a long period of time of like thinking of themselves as just sort of a big intellectual thing.
I see that. And you know what, at the end of the day, we need to find our moments, our life force, moments that allow us to be able to let off steam, or ultimately to get in contact, get in touch with whatever it is that gives us and refills our life force. You, Mr. Jesse Tyler Ferguson, have helped me fill my tank. If my tank was empty, it is now full. You want to see it again? Hold on.
You get it, right?
Oh, there's no question.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no question. And so, you are the modern meditating family, my friend. No, I just, I want to thank you for coming back. I want to thank you, as I was saying earlier, for writing this book, Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice for Anxious Times. We have time for just 2 more questions. The first question is, what do people come to you when they need help? People come to you when they need to calm. Who do you turn to, and who do you go to when you're having a bad day, when you're feeling weak, when you're full of stress?
Yeah, I mean, twofold. I mean, I suppose I should say threefold, because my wife is often the brunt of these things. But I've learned over time, particularly in this pandemic, how important it is that we don't isolate, and that in a normal year, I might get together with friends and to actually put time on the calendar and say, hey, can we catch up even for 20 minutes? And actually make those genuine heart connections that we were talking about earlier has been really huge. And then the second thing is, I have been in therapy since 2012 and am a big advocate for having people that we can just talk to openly as we engage our mind, because the mind is a lovely place and sometimes a scary place. And it's good for us to have guides and friends to help us move through some of the hard times.
Well, I'm sure in addition to your wife, in addition to your therapist, you can turn to this society. You can turn to Richie, who says hi, and he wished he could be here today. Richie Glassberg introduced us, and I'm so grateful for that. But you can always turn to us if you're having a bad day, to refill your tank like you have done for us. There is one interesting question. It is the Corona question, and I ask all my guests this question. It's a weird one, though, for everything we've been discussing. But what is your biggest vice?
Oh, it's cookies. Just legitimately, chocolate chip cookies have become the biggest. I think maybe in my 20s, it was like, oh, alcohol. And then it's like, no, I think a lot of the alcohol was like sugar. And now it's still like, oh, sugar. Yeah, because I don't drink very much anymore, but I do notice like midday, I'm like, oh, I can go get a cookie. So the sugar rush is my big vice.
Food and drink, it will take us down. It will take each and every one of us down. I guess mine has got to be a red wine, but I've reduced my consumption from, as I was saying, half a bottle to 1 glass. But if anybody ever tries to take me on about caffeine, there will only be one person standing, and that will be me. So do not cross me when it comes to taking away my caffeine. We're going to head to the Zoom after show, and Lodro will be there to help you with your breathing. Maybe we'll spin the wheel again. But you definitely want to go out and purchase this book. Now more than ever, the book was written in these anxious times. It is written for these anxious times. You will find the Buddha that walked into the bar. This time, he's not walking into the office because no one's going into the office, but he will walk into your life and he will help you find that calm, that connection, and your society, if you will, to be able to build that. You can connect with Lodro on LinkedIn. Much easier just to type Lodro Rinzler, right? As opposed to that ridiculous sequence. He was guest number 147, so he's not guest number 206 or whatever that number would have been today. He's the co-founder of Mindful, the author of Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice for Anxious Times. You can connect with him on Twitter. That's Peloton. That's me. You can connect with me on Peloton. You can follow Lodro on Instagram, on Twitter. And I think that's it, Lodro. Final word. Anything else you want to share before we head on over?
I'm just deeply appreciative of you having me here, and it's such a joy to connect with you and with the community again. So thank you.
You're welcome. Keep writing books so you can keep coming back. There will always be a home for you here. And as long as Chuck Norris is here, you will have a place at CoronaTV.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
You continue to be Chuck Norris approved. See you guys tomorrow with Mark Schaefer.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at coronatv.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.